On this channel, I talk a lot about rogue decks, which are basically just counter format decks. And hoo-wee, does this one go all out to be counter format? The Rocket On format was about stall and taking your time to set up, get a nice bench, build up everything on energy. This deck doesn't. This is a really fast deck that's ready to go on turn 2 and ready to start countering your opponent on turn 2. This deck is anti-baby Pokemon, which is huge for this format. And this deck, it actually uses a Trapper trainer base, which you would think that Cleffa would completely destroy a Trapper build. However, this deck can pull it off if it's fast enough. If you're not familiar with Trapper, I posted another video of it for the Prop 15 format. That deck was called Zappy Trappy, so go check that one out if you haven't already. And the main mon, of course, that I'm talking about is going to be Dark Muck. Of the rogue decks in this format, I found this one to be the most fun to play because it would surprise your opponent so much. Dark Muck was basically seen as a useless card all through Rocket, all through Prop 15 format. It only had 60 HP. Its ability wasn't that great. Its attack wasn't that great. No grass Pokemon were really usable at the time. But here's a card that can one-hit a baby Pokemon with Sludge Punch. It's going to deal 20 damage, and then in between turns, the poison will knock it out. If it can get that attack in, it can deal 50 damage to a Feraligatr using the exact same attack. And you can even stack a little more damage on there to make it a 2-hit KO because Dark Muck can utilize Darkness Energy to do that extra 10 damage. And Sticky Goo can actually come in very handy against Feraligatr as well because it will give Feraligatr a retreat cost of 5, which it's basically never going to use. Discarding 5 energy is really only useful if they've got another fully powered Feraligatr on the bench to bring out. So you can double gust out an underpowered Feraligatr that can attack you for a couple turns, start sludge punching, and your opponent's not going to be able to retreat unless they also have a warp point or a double gust. And that's where the Trapper core comes in. So you play Erica, as many Ericas as you want from your hand so that you can draw cards. Your opponent also gets to draw cards if they want to, but that doesn't really matter because you're only ever going to play an Erica if you have an Imposter Oak already in your hand, or if you're very confident that you can get it out of your deck on the same turn. So you and your opponent draw a bunch of cards. You play Imposter Oak's Revenge so that they're back down to only 4. And then that's when you play Rocket Sneak Attack to look at their hand and get a trainer card out of there and back into their deck. Most of the decks in this format are heavily reliant on trainers, especially for Feraligatr and Blaine's Arcanine. And this does a great job of depriving your opponent of resources so that they can't do what their decks are intended to do because they're, as I said, super reliant on things like Professor Elm. So yes, Cleffa can absolutely ruin this strategy, but the entire point of this deck is to bait out Cleffas so that Muck can swap in and knock them out easily. If played correctly, this deck can make it so that your opponent can't really use baby Pokemon in fear that they're going to get O-code by a Dark Muck, and it also makes it so they don't really want to play down their heavy hitters for the deck. Almost every deck in this format was built around just powering up a single powerful Mon to put in late game, and this deck also makes it so that if they do play those, you can actually trap them with Muck's ability as well as with a Murkrow, and deal damage either to their bench or directly to the active Pokemon while they're trying to power up, which was very negative against every other deck in the format, which is why Dark Muck made such a stupendous rogue deck for the time. So let's get into all of the cards that make up this wonderful deck and why they're so fun to play. So we've got a full playset of Grimer from the Rocket set coming up out of the sewer there. That 40 HP isn't great, but there's not really anything in format that's going to be knocking it out on turn 1. So you're going to make sure you evolve as quickly as possible. And there's a lot of cards in this deck that can actually utilize search trainers because Dark Muck is a dark Pokemon. And the Rocket set had a lot of really nifty trainers that would assist dark Pokemon and let you search them out, like the Boss's Way. So we also have full playset of the start of this deck, which is Dark Muck. Again, it's got an attack and an ability that weren't great upon release because it was having to go up against the big basic Pokemon from base, Jungle, and Fossil. But it really found its niche in this deck just because of its ability to knock out baby Pokemon basically, and to stall out when needed in order to deal consistent, decent damage over and over again. Cleffa's in here just in case you do run into another Trapper build, or if you just need to stall out for a couple of turns to use Eek, get the cards you need in your hand, and then retreat into a Muck or a Murkrow. Murkrow is great for trapping Feraligatrs in this deck. If you can pull one out with a Double Gust and then you pull a Murkrow as well, you can trap it with Mean Look and use Feint Attack to attack maybe a Feraligatr on the bench that's already built up a few energy and that would potentially be dangerous if it were to swap in. Or if you can use a Sludge Punch on an active Pokemon and get it poisoned, then you can swap into a Murkrow that has a Focus Band on it. And then that's pretty much going to make it so that your opponent can't swap out. They have to stay in and take that poison damage every turn until they can knock out that Murkrow at least. And because of that free retreat, Murkrow can easily swap into a Dark Muck whenever it's really time for Muck to come out and start dealing out those Sludge Punches on turn 2 or 3, very early on the game. It's really important that you start getting those off early, and it's super easy to do since Sludge Punch only requires 2 energy. Professor Realm's in here, so you don't have to rely on Cleffa. And then Focus Band, of course, so you can put on those Dark Mucks that have really low HP, or Murkrow so that they're harder to knock out. And you can more easily trap your opponent's Pokemon without them getting rid of Murkrow. And then you have your Ericas, mainly for your Trapper Trainer Core, but it's also very useful if you're just needing cards in your hand. If you get a couple of Ericas in your hand, that's easily 6 cards that you get to draw. And with that, you're going to get all the tools you need in this deck. Double Gust is to pull out your opponent's Pokemon that you want to trap, either with Dark Muck's Sticky Goo or with a Murkrow, depending on how you need to play and how the situation is playing out. Rocket Sneak Attack is part of the Trapper Trainer Core, but also if you're pretty sure that your opponent is just holding on to a Warp Point or a Double Gust, something really useful in their hand that is going to mess up your strategy next turn, you can just throw down a Rocket Sneak Attack by itself without all of the other Trapper combo cards, just to get it out of their hand so that you can play more easily. And one card going back into their deck it's going to be kind of hard for them to get back, even if they're taking the risk by pulling out a Cleffa and using Eek to try to get that one card back. And because this deck doesn't play very many Pokemon, it's pretty easy to run good manners in this deck. You can go ahead and play all the basics you have from your hand. You can slap down all the Grimer and Murkrow you have onto your bench, and then play good manners to just get another one. So that way you can start building up all 4 of your Mucks at the same time. That's another important part of this deck, is to get all 4 of those Grimer on the bench as fast as possible and start loading energy on them, because then you can use the boss's way to search out all of your Dark Muck. Use your good manners to get your Murkrow and your Grimer, then use boss's way to get the evolutions that you need. That way your setup is super quick, it's super efficient, and it's going to be really easy to get those cards in your hand because you have Professor Elm and Erica in this deck. And I didn't realize until after I had already recorded the video that I did mess up the deck list a little bit. I have 16 Grass Energy in this deck when it should actually be 12 Grass Energy and 4 Darkness Energy. The Darkness Energy are so you can use Mean Look and Feint Attack on Murkrow and attach them to Dark Muck when needed. If you can get a Darkness Energy on a Dark Muck, it allows it to 2-hit KO a Feraligatr, which is very, very important in this deck. However, it somehow slipped my mind whenever I was sleeving all of the cards, and I ended up fucking it up. So you can just let me know about that down in the comments. And just when you make your own deck list, if you do, make sure to substitute out those 4 Grass Energy for Darkness Energy. This is one of the instances where it's kind of a shame that the Rocket set got rotated out as new sets were added, because in the Neon format, there are actually 2 cards that really help this deck out, but then there is no Dark Muck in that format. And those are the Rocket's Hideout, which gives 20 HP extra to any Pokemon that has Dark in its name, and then also the Fossil Muck was reprinted in the Legendary Collection, which came out at the very end of the Neo block. And adding one of those into your deck would also help a lot because it shut down other Pokemon powers. And as we go through all these decks, a lot of them are very reliant on Pokemon powers. Stuff like Riptide, Giovanni's Machamp, Typhlosion, all of those decks completely shut down when you shut down their powers. But really, the worst thing that can happen to you with this deck is not getting setting up as fast as possible. If it takes you 3 or 4 turns to get set up, you've basically already lost. So in those cases, it's really hard to stall out with this deck and try to get back in the game. So it's vastly important that you get those 2 energy on Muck on turn 2 and start attacking or start trapping whatever their active is. And this deck suffers in the late game for the same reason. So if you can't win early on by knocking out all of your opponent's Pokemon, then it's really hard to last the entire game just dealing damage with Dark Muck and occasionally trapping with Murkrow. What you're going to have to do in those cases is try to stall out and keep your opponent from building up momentum with whatever their strategy is. But once a powerhouse deck like Steelix, like Feraligatr gets completely set up, it's going to be super, super hard to actually do anything to those setups. This deck excels at messing up those setups while they're in progress and also just getting early knockouts on Pokemon that have lower HP, or by trapping Pokemon that have poison on them and letting them slowly get knocked out over time. Basically to a point where your opponent's going to abandon them as they're active and stop putting energy on them and just let them be knockouts so that they can build up their bench. All around, this deck is very easy to use. It's very cheap to build. The most expensive card in it is going to be a Cleffa, and that's what makes it one of my favorite for this generation, is because it could take your opponent by surprise. It could be really disruptive if used correctly, and it was just super easy to build and use. So let me know what you think about this build down in the comments. Let me know what decks you want to see next. And until next time, bye.